Hey, this is Jon Reyes, and thanks for joining in on the Authority Marketing Blueprint. Sit back, relax, and grab your virtual seat, because in this episode and every other episode, I'll be interviewing and collaborating with another high-level marketing and copywriting expert. If you haven't yet, go ahead and get some help along the way as we dish out and pinpoint some of the most profitable, powerful marketing and copywriting wisdom. Get some help implementing everything you'll hear in this episode and other episodes by downloading my personal sales funnel swipe file stash at copyblueprints.com. Now, grab your virtual seat and listen. So today we have Alex Karp. He is the owner of a company called Etha Naturals, and I'm not sure there's a it's kind of like CBD. In my opinion, there's something called Kratom that's much better than CBD. It enhances kind of the focus aspect, the energetic aspect, the pain aspect. To me, it's, much natural, safer, tested version of Adderall, just as safe as CBD. But Alex owns, he's been just owning and operating the company for a long time. And, they're just doing extremely well with an extremely high integrity product with a very loyal customer base. So thanks for joining us, Alex.
Yeah, thanks for having me here.
So, we've met a few years ago, and, since then we've kind of become friends and traveled and all that good stuff. And I never really was familiar with Kratom, to be fully transparent. And as I got to know you and sampled it, I became a firm believer, and I've been using it every day. But the interesting part was learning how, you were actually a consumer of Kratom long before you started your business, right?
Correct. Yes. And so I'm an engineer by training and background. And so I worked for Hewlett Packard for about a decade. And when I was at HP, I had, amazing experience. I got to do innovation, do product design. I got to do something called metrology development. So developing analytical and test systems. I got to work with amazing people, and I got to transition into marketing and what we call technical marketing, which was kind of developing like this service and support system for a new business and kind of group that HP was creating, this multi-billion-dollar group. And so, yeah, it was just fascinating working at such a large company, but also then being on the innovative side and having essentially no limits to what we could think about, because it's anything that could be thought about, HP could make in a way. It just did not matter how technical or how deep. I mean, we had researchers at HP labs that were working on deep fundamental physics and changes to products, to whatever we wanted we could do. So I had that fortunate background of starting in that type of career that then allowed me to branch into entrepreneurship. And so I really liked that innovation side, and I became an entrepreneur, starting with an alternative to the cell phone case. And so I designed these 4 little corners that actually mimicked how the brain is protected inside of our skull. So the brain is kind of floats inside this liquid layer. And so if you hit your head, the brain is actually allowed to move a little bit longer and slow the impact down over a longer time. And that's what causes all this like great cushioning effect. And so I translated that into these 4 little corners that would stick onto a phone, and it actually performed better than a case as long as it kind of hit on a flat surface. So that was kind of like my first venture away from corporate America into entrepreneurship.
So how did you become a consumer of Kratom? Because I think in the world of alternative health and wellness, especially, I mean, just in marketing and business, but especially in alternative health and wellness, when you can become a passionate advocate of the product you market and sell, it's one of the keys to, when you can do that and find the right marketing and sales, you can become extremely successful. But the difference is you were a consumer of Kratom, years before you even started the business. So what was that transition like for, from being consumer to actually getting Etha Naturals off the ground?
Yeah, so I actually have some back pain. I have a degenerating disc in my lower back, and I started suffering from that chronic pain issue actually in high school. I played soccer competitively at club level and like throughout kind of when I was 5 years old all the way through high school, stopped at college. And in my freshman year of high school, I tweaked my back a little bit and, noticed that I like couldn't play a game. Went to my doctor, and HMO doctor was just like, well, these muscles back here are overstressed, they're weak. Let's just do some physical therapy. Let's do posture correction. And even after about 6 or 8 months of doing what the doctor was prescribed for me to do, I still wasn't getting better. I wasn't playing soccer at my normal level. And at the time, because I was at such a competitive soccer school, we had these European soccer coaches, and they were trying to convince me to go to a chiropractor. And after about 6 or 8 months of not seeing many results from my traditional healthcare, I decided to finally go to a chiropractor. And at that time, it was like a light switch for my back muscles. Apparently, there was kind of some misalignment in my neck, which is pretty common for soccer players because we head the ball so much. And that was causing some muscles in my glutes to not work properly. That was then shifting all the load to a kind of like smaller muscle in my back that was getting strained. And that's what I was feeling. So that was kind of like my first venture into managing my own health, so to speak, because, I went to my doctor and they really weren't helping. And that's what I found throughout the years is that chronic pain or chronic issues aren't really solved very well in our current healthcare system in the West. And for a long time, for a couple of decades, I was managing that back pain with chiropractic care, but then also with, a good diet, exercise, keeping my core strength, keeping my posture good, keeping everything kind of aligned. So a bunch of small things, keeping that chronic pain issue as best as I could. But as I got older, and especially as I, was an entrepreneur, getting more and more stress in my life, I found that when these little episodes I would have, I would kind of like tweak my back. It would kind of like stress my back, and I would go to the chiropractor. I would get readjusted. I would get kind of workout, and then over about the course of a week, it would kind of relax, and I go back to normal. And I would have that episode maybe once a year, or once every year and a half. But as I got older, that kind of became more frequent. And then that week turned into a little bit longer. It was like a week and a half or like 2 weeks. And what happened in 2016 was that I was going through this pain episode where I twisted my back. My pain was really bad. And so, like, when my back goes out, it would be debilitating pain. I can't sleep, can't walk, stand, sitting hurts. Everything is just miserable. And so I was in one of these pain episodes that was about 4 to 5 months long. And this was 2016. And so that kind of started spiraling me out, where because I was in this pain, I had to stop exercising, stop playing sports, stop going out with friends. And then that caused essentially depression. And so I was kind of, spinning down this spiral. Fortunately, my business partner now, his name's Victor, he was, he had his own chronic pain issues that he developed in college from mixed martial arts. He taught mixed martial arts. He was a coach. He also was a participant. And because of that, he was a big fan of Joe Rogan. And this was when Joe Rogan just first started doing his podcast, was very focused on mixed martial arts, and MMA wasn't really as big as he is now. And so Victor was listening to a podcast, and Chris Bell came on, who was talking about Kratom, because Kratom was going through this. Essentially what happened was the FDA found that some people in Norway had an issue with the Kratom product, and they were trying to claim that they needed to schedule Kratom, make it completely illegal, because Kratom itself is mostly unregulated across the world. So it's widely available, but it's also unregulated, which means it's, as a consumer, you got to be kind of careful what you're purchasing. So Victor and I heard about Kratom on a podcast. And then because we had both these chronic pain issues, and I was in this really depressed state where I've been going this 5-month pain episode, I decided to go ahead and order some. So Kratom's unregulated, fully widely available. And we found it on several websites. And that was kind of our first introduction to this plant botanical.
So bringing the awareness, I guess there's two aspects to it, right? Because, in marketing and sales, or so, especially in marketing, especially in online marketing nowadays, there's the customer journey of, hey, for example, CBD is so well known nowadays. I mean, like medical marijuana, right? It's just, hey, our company sells medical marijuana or CBD. This is why it's superior. Then there's the journey of the educational based sale we start in the beginning, right? Because if we had to educate people on medical marijuana or CBD, it'd be a totally different marketing process because you're on that more challenging end of the spectrum where it's at least in the beginning, you had to educate your customers and your clientele on the benefits of kratom before you can even talk about, before you can sell them on the product. Because I mean, even probably our listeners, and when I first met you, it was selling me on actually what kratom was before you can sell me on the purity of the product. So, you went from consumer to kind of the operations and kind of the marketing. I guess of course, it's working with partners, and of course, everyone works with some level. Freelancers, partners, CEOs, operations managers. At some level, we collaborate. But how did you feel the transition? I mean, was there something, a specific, something for someone listening who aspires to be at your level, for example, or who's at multiple seven figures as well, who wants to, get to eight figures? What is something you can share? Something that you transition from consumer to the business owner to actually, now we're actually making a lot of sales. Well, actually, what was the biggest challenge, I guess?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, with kratom, there's a lot of challenges, mainly because it's in a gray area where it's unregulated, but it does have very profound pharmacokinetic effects. And so when Victor and I first ordered kratom, we just bought it online, and we basically found that what people shipped to us was kind of just like a packaging that was sometimes somewhat unprofessional, as far as like very basic, kind of looked like somebody had gotten some generic packaging online and then just handwritten kind of what the product was. And so kratom itself is a tree that grows in Southeast Asia. And traditionally, people will pick the leaves, dry the leaves, and then brew it into a tea. And typically used for kind of fatigue, just to boost in energy, boost in mood. And a lot of people have been starting to use it for chronic pain issues. And so that's what kind of first drew Victor and I to the message about kratom, about what it was and why people are using it. And so when we ordered it, we got it in, and it was only because Victor and I were in a chronic pain issue that we were kind of, desperate as a consumer of, we tried all sorts of stuff. I mean, my business partner, he had been going through like cortisol shots, steroid shots. He'd been looking at surgery that was maybe 50-50 or 60% effective and likely to kind of have some very bad side effects if things went wrong during the surgery. I'd been going through all sorts of modalities and trying to incorporate breath work, yoga, exercise, all these things. And still my pain was such a hindrance to my just everyday life that I didn't, foresee myself having kids or a family, just because at some point my back would go out and I wouldn't be able to pick them up, enjoy them. I kind of became angry. So we were willing to try it because of our circumstance. And the product coming to us was very questionable, to say the least. It's like a dry green powder, very bitter. So the consumer experience is terrible. But through all of that, because of, say, my engineering background, self-experimentation, we're entrepreneurs, are willing just to try things. Victor and I tried some kratom. 15, 20 minutes later, we turned to each other. We're like, hey, how are you feeling? They're like, oh, like for the first time ever, I kind of forgot about my pain. So my pain goes from a 9 or a 10 down to like a 2 or a 3. And it just kind of dissolves in the background. I forget about it. I get distracted by work, by going out with friends, family. It's kind of like normal things in life I can re-engage in. So for us, kratom was amazing, but that customer experience was very questionable. And then also we found that when we tried to reorder kratom, so reorder the same kind, and you brought up CBD and medical marijuana, which very similar. There's a lot of strains or varieties that are claimed to be for these products, but yet that information doesn't really necessarily correlate to the consumer benefits that we're looking for, just because there's a lot of complexities in these natural products. But then what we found out is that kratom is widely researched, and there's active ingredients. The main one is called mitragynine, which is an alkaloid produced only by the kratom tree. And so what we did is we figured that we could use our background in high-tech engineering companies and apply that to this new product, or this new to most people product, where we could apply kind of the best of what we know about a high-tech company analytics, engineering, quantifying those active ingredients, and then putting that through our own products so that we can provide transparency and quality of that actual kratom product to the end consumer. So let's put a brand around it to give that confidence and credibility that this is an authentic product. Let's use our background in digital printing and transparency in the data to put a QR code and publish the active ingredients on each package to give the consumers information they need.
So that's very much that's a more interesting perspective in my opinion, because it's you took a shift away from the marketing and sales. It was instead of, the founders, or of course there's more than one founder, one person will play one role or the other, but from you it went from, the passion about the product. What kind of product are we going to deliver? How can we maintain, high quality, the standards, purity, because for these kinds of supplements. So it's kind of a journey, and for people listening as well, I think sometimes it's easy to rush, or at least somewhere along the lines, when you're making money, to just start to cut corners. But it's always maintaining the purity and keeping that passion and connection with the product you sell, especially when it's a supplement, is extremely important. I think that's the foundation for something that's also fulfilling, and to keep, customers coming around long term. There are some amazing business owners, and usually they exceed multi-million dollar levels because of that passion.
Mhm.
But there's many, sometimes it's tempting to just skip ahead to, how much money can we make?
Sure. And that's actually very applicable to the kratom industry in itself, because most of the kratom products are sold in, I would call them, say, non-traditional retail, because it doesn't have a lot of awareness to it. And so a lot of kratom products will be sold in, say, convenience stores, or what are traditionally called smoke shops or head shops. And those are really people looking for that near term selling just to get a quick sale at the sacrifice of maybe tomorrow. And so that was one thing we found about that with kratom, is that even though it's a legal, unregulated product, there's a lot of stigma against it because of some of these people who decided to, as an example, we couldn't get credit card processing because kratom is looked at as like this high risk category, because a lot of people in that industry would do like manual entries and just charge people on their credit card. So from their point of view, it was a risky category because of where it was traditionally sold and how some of the practices were around. And so Victor and I purposely looked at kratom and saw that, well, it's such a benefit for us, for our lifestyle, for our chronic pain. We know that chronic pain is a large, large market. When you look at everything from just chronic pain to occasional pain to sports therapy related pain, there's such a broad application for this that, okay, if we can turn this product into a consistent known supply chain, if we can put a little branding and trust around it, if we can quantify the active ingredients of what's related to these potential benefits, then we could kind of do a much longer term business model. And so that's where we purposely decided to not go after the traditional resale channels. We wanted to take our brand and build it slowly over time and go after a more mainstream market. So purposely going into grocery stores or health food stores, vitamin shops, where kratom currently is not there. But that's where we wanted to build our brand, set that foundation that we knew was going to take a long time. And so that's been some of the challenges of being an entrepreneur, is that it's hard to sometimes kind of stick to that long-term vision when you're just trying to make, monthly bills, when you're trying to get slowly grow and kind of you wish for investment. But it's such a hard area to go out and get funding for if it's not really an established product, established business. So that was kind of a purposeful choice, but it's definitely been a hard choice for us to stick to at times. But there are long-term benefits that are slowly kind of starting to open up for us, and we think we'll be very successful with that longer term vision.
I would assume that's kind of the, what is that? What are those called? Not I would say side effects, but one, a positive side effect of maintaining those standards is people who, are giving you unsolicited reviews, is people going to your walk-in store, is purchasing from you over and over and over because, you've maintained that integrity and that passion, right? Because you
Yeah,
don't just have an
absolutely.
online store, but you have a local store in northern San Diego where people actually will drive all the way. It's kind of a hard, it's not really it's a place where you kind of have to drive really far out to in San Diego. We have a good amount of foot traffic as well. And I think that's a compounding, I guess, side effect from having that kind of maintaining that kind of passion, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we do experience because I mean, because of being an entrepreneur, we're always faced with the immediate and most difficult challenges. So as a business owner, if I can make a process simple or repeatable, then I'm going to have my, an employee take over that responsibility. Or then ideally I'll have a process or some kind of system do that for the company in general. And so that means as an entrepreneur, we're always faced with that immediate challenge of the day, as well as the most difficult ones that other people can't solve. And so that's kind of the constant battle that we're trying to not maybe let get to us mentally. And so we don't, and because related back to that long term, say, side effect of creating this brand and this credibility, is that we don't always see the benefits of it directly or even kind of know about it until several years later. And so we've been doing this company now for about 7 years, and just maybe 3 years ago, so about 4 years after we've kind of had this vision, it's kind of a we had Oregon State University reach out to us because they were starting to get into some research on kratom, and they wanted to get a kratom biomass supply that was well characterized, authentic, credible for a research trial that they were doing. And so it was kind of those little types of, I don't know, like benefits or that type of value we just don't necessarily know about until it happens years later. So, it did work, and we are getting there. We're getting that credibility and that kind of sustainable business model out of it. But it's definitely been that consistency for year after year, saying no to some things and believing in your vision and making sure that, you'll get there eventually has been rewarding and definitely the most challenging at the same time.
I'd say that's your hit, not necessarily hit, but it's kind of, even when you're hitting the multi-million dollar level, it's still like bobbing and weaving, so to speak. And the funny part is it's not competition all the time because CBD, I don't know what else. I mean, the CBD, for example, is just one of those things where you got to stay on top of it. You got competitors popping around left and right. You got to work on your marketing, your packaging, your USP. But what you're faced with is a different challenge because of the compliance issues. Because it's not, it's still in that categorization of CBD, but then there's that gray area of, things are changing. There's things you got to keep up with, and you're flying around the world. You're attending online conferences to stay on top of that. So how do you feel? Is that kind of just a normal, has that just become a routine way of doing business to, but the thing is, right, you said higher standards, but it just become a routine way of doing business? Is it something, you delegate in terms of weaving through compliance?
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple aspects to that side. I mean, I would say that it's a, I think I learned some of that concept just working for very large brands. Like even when I was in college, I worked for Whirlpool Corporation that owns KitchenAid, Maytag. They own a lot of really well-known brands. And as an example, they had to follow certain regulations made by Underwriters Lab, UL. So if anyone kind of sees certain appliances or a lot of electronics will have a UL certification on there. And those are kind of minimum requirements that are set by the government essentially to protect consumers so that this refrigerator won't burn someone's house down, or if something happens, it's not going to have a catastrophic event. But what I learned early on going through that engineering kind of early career with during college with them was that even though Whirlpool had kind of this mandated set of requirements required by law, they would always have this other set of internal requirements that they wanted to protect their brand, because they knew that in order to compete long term, they couldn't just do the bare minimum. They needed to do that, of course, because for safety and all sorts of reasons. But then in order to keep competing and winning long term, they would elevate their standards to a much higher level and really kind of deliver that value for the end customer. So that was kind of some of the start that we wanted to do, was that, okay, what are some of the basic minimum requirements doing that research as far as food products, supplements, and a drug? What's the classification between that? What are we allowed to do, not allowed to do? And then because Kratom is in this gray area, okay, what would we like to see as consumers? Well, I want to be able to, have this information in order for me to use this product correctly. And then on top of that, okay, now how do we start implementing that consumer benefit or that consumer information into our brand? And then at the same time, because as you kind of mentioned, Kratom is becoming regulated in a good way. We want this common sense regulation because the benefits are so great for society that we are doing. There's now 13 states have passed Kratom Consumer Protection Act, and there's a federal bill for the Kratom Consumer Protection Act. And so that type of, I guess, branding or reasons for the consumer starts to become required in some of this legislation. So it's really trying to create what we want it to be. And it's kind of fascinating that we're involved at such different levels, everything from harvesters in Indonesia to growing our own kratom in a greenhouse here, to we do our own manufacturing internally, we do our own branding, marketing. We also work with legislators to influence these bills that are going through. And so it's been a great learning experience, to say the least, but it's also very, I don't know, wide and spread as far as how much we're trying to do.
So it's gone far beyond, as a result of this, you've also become a source of wisdom, or a resource that people can turn to as being proactive in this community, and for people who want to learn from you from not just the kratom standpoint, but from, maintaining these standards and understanding the industry from the ins and outs, the good and the bad. And I'd assume as a result, it's just these things are natural. I mean, you had a deal with the professional athlete coming in, and you have just this, it's just this level of, if people were to come to you and ask, like just I came to you to be on the podcast, I know you've had numerous people asking you to be on podcasts and to speak and to attend these kind of conferences. And at this level of just maintaining these high standards, it's just probably become almost second nature to you to just, if someone asks you, just knowing these things off the top of your head, right? If someone has a question, or someone is confused, or someone has an exciting idea, as a result of maintaining these standards for many years, you're probably at that point where it's just, it just comes naturally for your ideas to click with someone else's, or to help someone else solve their problem, if it's compliance or logistically with kratom.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's also where some of our best partners come from, mainly because, so since we do everything from the harvesting, importing, manufacturing, part of what we'd had to kind of pivot throughout the years just to kind of maintain revenue has been, okay, we have our online brand that we started with. We also started doing manufacturing for other brands, white labeling, to keep that revenue stream when other parts were kind of becoming difficult. As then we went into retail channel, but then as COVID kind of hit, we had to switch back. So there's a lot of aspects to that. And part of that, the expertise that we've been developing, there's been other kratom companies across the world. So the European Union is kind of in a similar regulatory status where kratom does not necessarily fit into a food category. It's not quite a drug category. It's kind of in this in between. And so are other botanical products such as CBD, kava, kanna. There's a whole host of products in that category. And one of our best business partners now, he started a kratom company in the Czech Republic, and he really emulated what we had started to do, where we started providing the transparency and the testing. We set up these labs. We work with universities or third-party labs to really identify if these analytical methodologies are correlated to the consumer benefits. So he was able to kind of model what we were doing in the United States for his company in the Czech Republic, and saw similar type of credibility growth, just because consumers are kind of notorious for brand switching in some ways. If they can get a similar product from a different brand, they'll kind of let price dictate. But when it comes to kratom, because there is so much of an unregulated market out there, people will be enticed by a lower price, but then they find, oh, well, it didn't quite work how I wanted it to, or just was different. So a lot of times they'll end up coming back to Etha or to these brands like us that are providing that true testing, that authentic product. And so that's where we're able to grow and scale just our partnerships with other companies, even if it's not just our brand directly.
I mean, we can go on forever. We probably should plan a second episode or something. But so there's probably two ways. If people want to get in touch with you from a consumer standpoint, or at least learn more, whether or not if people are familiar with Kratom from a consumer standpoint, whether or not they use it or are interested, what's the best way to view your products? Or
Yeah, so I mean, our website, ethanaturals.com, is a great resource. We have a lot of blog articles. We have a great customer service team that will, if you want to reach out to them directly or send us an email, we'll happily answer questions. We also have been doing a podcast for a number of years now, just because of that information, trying to get as much of it out there as possible. So if people want to submit questions, we then try to answer them on a podcast in kind of longer format, go through the details of whatever people want to know about. Additionally, we do have some at Etha Naturals for our social media. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and those areas as well.
what about for people who kind of just want to pick your brain or want to be a potential partner? There's many people who are, I've met, there's, I like to stick with some of the highest integrity, most passionate marketers when it comes to alternative health and wellness, and there's many who can learn from you. Is there a better way to reach you in terms of talking business about compliance with that? Or
Sure. Yeah. I mean, Alexander at ethanaturals.com is my email, and happy to answer email questions or get on a phone call or a Zoom call. Always like connecting with people, and I have more to learn myself. So as we're going through all of this, I always love connecting and learning what other people are doing and trying to figure out where we can take what we've established so far, as well as help out others in any way possible.
awesome. Yeah, there's a ton everyone can learn from you. So let's plan a second episode. Till then, thanks, Alex.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, see ya. Thanks again for joining us. We enjoyed having you sit there right next to us in your virtual seat, and I hope the feeling was mutual. Don't forget to rate, share, and subscribe to the Authority Marketing Podcast. And if you'd like, check out some other episodes we've got. Stay tuned for our next one.